Welcome back to Georgian Bay Classics. We're here at Cobble Beach Concours d'Elegance, and we're here with Sharon Babian. Sharon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're here standing beside the Seth Taylor steam buggy, which we all agree is the oldest car in Canada. It was built in 1867 by Henry Seth Taylor, who was a jeweler in Stansted, Quebec, in the Eastern Townships. And although he was a very successful jeweler by trade, he was also an inveterate tinkerer and inventor. And this was one of his favorite inventions. It's a two-cylinder steam engine, and obviously built on basically a carriage structure, which would have been the style of the time. And it was fueled by wood, which was in the boiler.
Could you show us the boiler,
sure.
please?
This is a replica boiler. It's not an actually operating boiler. There's no air intake and no place to put the fuel in. But this looks like the boiler would have looked, and so the wood would have been down there in the firebox, and the water would have been in here, or the water would have been in here somewhere, and then the steam would have been created up in here, and that would have gone through here to the throttle that would have controlled the steam pressure, and therefore the movement of the cylinders underneath the carriage structure.
This valve right here is the actual control valve for the amount or the volume of steam that is actually comes through.
That I believe so. Yes, that. It was a fairly simple steam engine. So
and that creates then the pressure that would come into your two-cylinder engine
That's
here.
Right.
That
That's
ends
right.
up driving the unit.
Yeah.
Can you come around and show us, Sharon,
sure.
how the throttle actually works? I find that incredible.
Well, it turns like this, and you would adjust it according to how fast you want it to go. You would also be mindful of the pressure building up, and be careful not to have too much pressure building up. And I believe that this device here was a way of keeping track of the pressure that was building up in the boiler.
You can see at the top, just for our viewers, this is actually similar to your hot water tank. This is a pressure relief valve,
yeah.
Sharon, that
yeah.
what does enable that additional pressure to escape
yeah.
from that glass cylinder. Very, very primitive device.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
Very important if you don't want your boiler blowing up.
Tell us about this mechanism that's chain-driven right
Okay.
here, and then the handle at the top, please.
Well, this is called a tiller, and it's essentially a steering device that turns the wheels. I can't turn it too much because the wheels are blocked, and we don't want to turn them. This was the typical sort of device that you would have found on early quadricycles, human-powered quadricycles or tricycles were sometimes steered by tiller. The trick with tiller steering was if you wanted to go left, you pushed it to the right. If you wanted to go right, you pushed it to the left. Rather like steering an ancient ship.
Or trying to back up your trailer, going in the opposite direction.
Right. That's
as well.
right.
The other thing for our viewers, you can see that we have a set of leaf springs. We actually have two leaf springs on the back of the buggy, and we have a single leaf spring on the front of the buggy. And is that your primitive suspension?
Yes, that was fairly typical of carriage suspension at the time. We have a carriage collection at the museum, and you'll see the same type of springs there. Slightly different location, obviously, because you wouldn't have the boiler at the back, so the springs at the back would have probably been similar to this.
And all your wheels are wood spoked?
They are.
They're
like a carriage wheel.
Like a carriage wheel, and this is a metal band?
A metal shoe, yeah.
A metal shoe that surrounds it, of course, so that it protects it from wear. What about bearings in the wheels themselves? Are there any sort of bearings at all inside?
I don't think so.
So this is literally metal on metal then inside this wooden chamber?
I would think so, yeah. Yeah.
Could we just walk around to the front of the buggy, and you could talk about this reservoir that's at the front?
Yeah.
What this container is and what it holds and the purpose behind it?
We're not absolutely certain of that, but we believe it would have been an extra water reservoir. There is a hose that goes down underneath, but right now the hose is just not connected to anything. It's just held up underneath. It's all looped around the undercarriage, so it's not connected. But my assumption is that this would have been an additional water reservoir.
I would imagine your driving distance would be, how far would you be able to go with this buggy?
I think not very far at all. I think maybe a few miles at most.
And then what about speed? What about speed?
I think for speed, maybe 15 kilometers an hour.
Okay.
We're not absolutely certain about that. There are different stories about what its top speed would have been, but that's what we think, that it was probably around 15 to 20 kilometers an hour.
And again, for our viewers, if you look at the drive mechanism of this, you can actually see there's a shaft that goes out from that 2-cylinder motor, and then it's on a cam wheel. And that cam would revolve 360 degrees,
yeah.
And that enabled your forward motion, or I guess you could actually drive this in reverse, or do you know that?
We don't know that for sure. Most steam engines were reversible, but this is such a small, primitive one that we're not sure that it was. That's something that, one of the many questions that's come up in discussions here at the concours, so I'm looking forward to getting back to the museum and looking through those records more. One of the other things that is interesting to point out is that because Mr. Taylor was a jeweler, the metalwork on here is just beautiful.
It's gorgeous. Their brass work is spectacular. You can see it with your 2-piston motor.
And on the rear axle, which is also the drive shaft, you can see the little oil cups and the filigree in there. It's very beautiful work. And the metalwork is essentially what survived when it was retired and abandoned in this barn. The wood obviously decayed fairly quickly, but the metal was, he had chosen good metal and it survived. He had taken the boiler off and used it for another of his projects.
Right.
So the original boiler was gone, but all the metalwork survived, and that was what allowed the man who bought the remains of the vehicle to rebuild it. So he took great care with this vehicle. He built almost all of it himself, which is quite remarkable. He didn't just do the steel work or the metal work, he also did some of the woodwork. The only thing I believe he asked for assistance with was the boiler.
Is that right?
That makes sense, because it would have been a pressure vessel that would have had to have been riveted, and so he had a friend who was a blacksmith in the town, and he helped him work on that, and perhaps some of the springs as well. But everything else he did.
This is an absolutely gorgeous machine, and it is a piece of history here in Canada. We believe to be the first vehicle in all of Canada in 1867, year of Confederation.
That's right.
Georgian Bay Classics, we would love to know where else we could go to see other vehicles like this. Tell us about the museum.
Well, this particular vehicle is one of the most popular features of our current exhibit that's on the floor, called In Search of the Canadian Car. And that exhibit attempts to get our visitors and get Canadians thinking about what makes a car Canadian. This one is in the section called Designed by Canadians, in which there's also a Russell automobile and a Manic from the 1970s.
How do we get in touch with you, or how do we get in touch with the museum?
Well, the museum has a website, which is, if you just Google Canada Science and Technology Museum, you'll find our website. I'm the curator of transportation at the museum, so I'm also on the website. You can also find a way to get in touch with me. We do occasionally do tours of the warehouse, because most of our collection is in storage. It's not on the floor. We have only about 2 to 5% of our collection on the floor.
Okay.
So we have many automobiles in storage, and we're happy to take people through those storage facilities on special occasions, if we can arrange a tour for a group of people, and during Doors Open, which is usually the first weekend in June. And then we let the public come into the warehouses and see the cars.
What a great piece of automobile history, and just want to say, what a great place to be here at Cobble Beach, Concours d'Elegance. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.